Whatever you've been doing for the Occupy movement, you are part of that whole heritage, part of that whole history. And it's like that chain goes way, way back, and that chain will continue. Whatever happens to us, whatever happens to this phase of the movement, that impulse in human beings to stand up and demand a world that's better for ourselves and for the next generations, to demand fairness and justice, and to look around and say, we have to come back into harmony in the way that we live in nature. That impulse is never going to die. You can stomp it down, you can evict it, you can tear gas it, you can pepper spray it, but it just comes back stronger and stronger than ever. You can't evict an idea, yeah. So, I am wondering if you'd like to move around and do something, rather than just listen to me for any longer. Maybe we want to do some questions and answers, and then do something, get everyone up and moving. Temperature check. Anyone? Questions and answers? Who wants to do that? Comments, yeah. All right. Who wants to get around, move around, and do something active right now? Okay. All right. Looks like people want some questions and answers. Why don't we do that, and we can move into that a little bit later, or comments. So, I'd love to hear something from you. I just can't see you all very well. The sun is blinding me. Yeah. Yeah, unless we can move the mic around. Okay.
Starhawk, I've read The Fifth Sacred Thing a few times, and right now I'm reading it with my daughter. When we're separated, we read over the phone. We're down to the last 40 pages. It's such an amazing book, and all the things that you do, and I'm wondering when the film manifestation of that is happening.
The movie manifestation of The Fifth Sacred Thing, which is a novel I wrote about 20 years ago about the future, where Northern California has become this great sort of ecotopian, socially just, wonderful future. And Southern California, unfortunately, has gone the other way and then invades the north. We've been working on making a movie of that, and this summer we did a whole campaign on Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding website to get the seed money we need to take it to the next phase. And that was very successful. People were enormously supportive. We raised a big chunk of money, which is the money that we need to get together, basically, the planning for phase 2. So it's not about to come out anytime soon. What we are hoping is that by January we'll have our whole investment packet together for financing, and we can take that and bring in the money that will take us to the pre-production and into the next phase. We would love to have it out in 2013 or early 2014. It'll depend on how well that next phase goes. But part of that is something, for me, part of putting that movie out is partly about creating a vision of the future people can see, and that hopefully will inspire them and make them feel like, wow, that's the world I want to live in. And part of it is seeing if we can take a system which is really not set up to empower creative people or artists, but to make huge profits for companies, and divert some of that money to making that world happen as we're making the movie happen. So we wrote a green plan for the production. That's not just about how we make the production itself as ecologically sensitive as possible, but also, if we're going to create sets that show the streets of San Francisco torn up and turned into gardens with flowing streams, why not create them in places where they can remain as gardens that will be resources for the community, rather than just tearing them down like they normally do when you make a movie. And, yeah. And then, if we're going to do that, you have to think, because a lot of us involved in it have done a lot of permaculture and a lot of garden building. One of my dear friends, Eric Olson, who teaches with me, is part of a group called Planting Earth Activation in Sebastopol, and they got inspired in 1999. They got really activated around Y2K and thought civilization was going to fall apart, so they went around madly planting gardens all over Sebastopol. It was great. But what they found was a lot of times you plant gardens, and if you're not there to tend them, they just die. So in order to avoid that happening, we have to not just build the gardens, but we have to think now about how do we build the infrastructure to support the gardens. What are the community organizations we want to work with that might have interns that could be trained? We're looking at trying in the spring to set up a greenhouse where we can begin propagating some of the plants we'll ultimately need for the movie, and to do it in a way where we can hire some young people from the inner city community who don't have a lot of job options and give them the training they need over time, so that by the time the movie is out, they'll know how to manage a production greenhouse and have a resource that they can use for the community. And the more things that we can do like that in the course of creating the movie, then the more we'll actually be creating the world that the movie shows. And maybe by the time the movie comes out, it'll be old news for everybody. Oh yeah, that was a nice vision. But now, I can see that anytime I walk out of my street. Yes.
Something that Occupy was my first real attack on activism. And as inspirational as it was really difficult to get past all of the infighting and pissing contests and just you against me. My issue is more important here. There's so much of it going on. It's so difficult to move forward positively. How do you get us that?
So she was saying, was difficult in the Occupy movement to get past the infighting and the jockeying for my issues more important than yours. I think that's one of the key things that we need to work on as a movement. And again, I think maybe at the end we can explore a couple of different ways of discussing things that don't necessarily have to turn into, as you put it, pissing contests, right? I think we get into that because we come into activism and we're angry. We're angry. We've been, we're for all of those good reasons that are driving us out here. And it's easier sometimes to unleash that anger on each other than it is on the systems, because the systems are big and far away, and we're right up close and personal. I think we also come into the Occupy movement feeling unheard because we haven't been heard. Our voices haven't been heard. And when we come into the movement, sometimes it's like we have this driving need to be heard to the point where it's really hard to get us to shut up and listen, because it's like we've got this pent-up need to speak. My hope is that as people get more familiar, feel more confident that they can be heard and will be heard, that need sort of is no longer quite so pressing, and we can focus on teaching people and learning how to listen to one another as well as how to express themselves and how to speak. Yeah.
Can you speak to the role of spirituality in Occupy movement, or in general terms of changing the world?
About the role of spirituality. I think at its core, the Occupy movement is a spiritual movement. I actually wrote a post for this for a religion blog I write for called On Faith that Newsweek and the Washington Post put up. Because it's a movement about values. It's about saying, what is it that are our core values that we most deeply value? And thank you, whoever gave me the sun to move now. Okay. you know.
Do you want to move 10 feet over?
Sure.
Oh, stop.
Following the sun. The Woody Guthrie song, keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. So, yeah, it's about holding the value that everybody is important. Everyone has value. Everyone's voice is important. You don't have to be rich. You don't even have to be sober or sane. You know, you are still part of a 99%, and your voice is important. And that, to me, is a very deep spiritual value. There are also spiritual practices which haven't yet, you know, which aren't so common in the movement, but I think are things that can, you know, be brought into the movement. You know, spiritual practices, magic, ritual, in some ways it's an ancient psychology, and a lot of it is the technology of how to bring people together and help people bond and help people find ways of connecting beyond just left brain rational thinking, but more connecting from the heart. And there are a lot of different ways to do that, from dancing and chanting and drumming and singing, you know, to sitting in council and passing a talking stick and giving people a chance to speak without being interrupted about what their life story is, or chance to step in and say something that you're disturbed about or you're bringing to the movement, and have other people step in with you. And I think, again, as we become a little more skilled and sophisticated about the different ways that we meet together, we can bring more of those things into the movement and have more ways for us to connect that I think can enrich us and can help us renew our energies and our spirits. The other thing is that activism can get hard. It can be traumatic. We're also in our movement dealing with a lot of people who bring in the trauma that they've experienced all their life. If you're poor, you know, there's a kind of endemic trauma to that. If you are a person of color in a racist society, there's a kind of ongoing trauma. If you're someone who's been labeled mentally ill, or if you've been without a home, all those things, you carry that in. And spirituality is one of the very powerful ways that we can start to address that and help to heal that, you know. And part of that is just simply learning ways to be present with one another, to listen, to bear witness, to hear people's experience, not to necessarily try to fix it for them, because often you can't fix it, but even just being there and being present with it, listening to it, can be a powerful way of offering healing. So about social change itself and how it happens. And she was saying in Vancouver there's a number of long-term activists that are not getting involved in Occupy. I think that's true in a lot of places, and I think part of it is many long-term activists are already so occupied with the activism they're already doing that it's hard to add on top of it another whole social movement. And for those of us who have been long-term activists, I think it's important to know, as much as we get to the Occupy movement, that those other things that we have been doing are still important, and they still are vital, and we don't want to just drop them and abandon them. We need to really carefully kind of marshal our energies and figure out how we can maintain them, keep them going, and how the Occupy movement can give them energy rather than drain energy from them. Because the Occupy movement is also kind of, it's like the action that never ends. You know, back when we were blockading Seattle or something, you'd work your butt off for weeks and months leading up to the action. You'd have an intense week or two where you're on the street, maybe you're in jail, you're supporting people in jail, you're working. Then you crash and you go home for a while, right? And you do kind of recover. But in the Occupy movement, it never ends, right? There's no time, right? The occupation is your home. There's nowhere to go. So we have to get really good at being able to kind of set our own boundaries and learn to do our own self-care around it. Because otherwise, if we burn out, then that's not really going to serve the movement in the long run. I don't think that there's one way social change happens. I think it happens on multiple levels. And that's, again, another reason why I think we, instead of getting into these things of my way is the right way, or my tactic is the right way, or my cause is the most important cause, we've got to understand that all of these causes are important. The thing that we are contesting is so huge and overarching, and the need to be creative and to invent new things is so enormous that we really need a multiplicity of approaches, not just one. And so I think if we can understand that, then we can really support all the kinds of activism people are doing. And again, look at, say, what are some of the ways the Occupy movement can help bring some attention. In San Francisco, some people from the Occupy movement have been supporting people who are trying to take back homes that have been foreclosed, for example. In Oakland, they called the general strike. In other places, in Washington, D.C., one of the actions we had while I was back there was also around the Keystone Pipeline. Finding out what are the key issues in your area, in your place, and how do we support them rather than expecting people to drop what they're doing and support us, I think will help the movement grow a lot stronger. And finally, I'll say, committing yourself to a movement, it's kind of like falling in love, right? When you fall in love, no matter how many times you've been hurt before, there's still that part of you that goes, oh, this is it. Someone can really love me and care for me, and I can love them, and this could actually work out, and we could be happy. And with the movement, it's like, well, this could be it. We could really do it. We could really change the world. And those of us who've been around for a long time, we've had our hearts broken a number of times. By movements, by relationships, So there may be activists out there that just they're still heartbroken from their last movement, right? They aren't quite able to believe in this one yet, It may take a while. You want to kind of go, oh, all right, that person was really attractive, but before I throw my heart and soul into this, I want to make sure that they aren't already committed to somebody else, or they aren't about to go off and meditate in the jungles of Thailand for the next 5 years, right? So a little patience might help.